Caesar. And it's a docudrama, but it's really well done. It's actually shocking how good they did. About how Caesar took power in the Civil War, the Battle of Pharsalia. So it's a really good thing to show on Wednesday. Thursday we'll have the quiz. I was going to watch Engineering the Empire this week, but next week it's going to be a really weird week. There's this whole election thing coming up, and who knows if we might be in Civil War by Friday. But and there's a chance I might miss a day. If I do have to miss a day, I can also show that. So I'm kind of saving Engineering Empire alone for next week. Sound good? All right, so let's go ahead and get back to. So I showed that decisive battles, Cana, because I just want to show that battle. Now, Hannibal defeated the Roman armies. And I'll talk a little bit more about the Roman armies when we get to Marius, who created the Roman army. He created it. His nephew would be Caesar. A small world, huh? And Marius was an interesting guy. We'll also have a bloodthirsty maniac too tomorrow. That'll be fun. Sulla. So this is what I finished up yesterday. I got right to the notes. I think on Friday I mean the Samnite Wars. Were 3 separate wars where the Romans knocked out the Samnites who lived here and then finished the conquest of much, at least the boot of Italy. And these are Samnite soldiers. But the big thing is they divided and conquered and would absorb some parts into their empire relatively independently, and some parts they wouldn't at all. The Romans were a shockingly duplicitous group. Don't forget though, it's hard to put our morals with them. You know, they just have a totally different background and point of view. You can a little bit, but not completely. Watch out for that. So, this is one thing I want to get really quick. While they're attacking south, they got into Greek colonies. And a combination of the Greek colonies along with some of these Italian states asked the Greek kingdom of Epirus to come over and save them. And Pyrrhus of Epirus came over to help a combination of the Greeks in Sicily and the Greeks in the foot of Italy. So he came here first to Sicily to make sure they would be still protected, and then would end up fighting the Romans. And in a massive battle at Heraclea, Greek phalanx, remember the phalanx? Defeated the Roman army, which had more of a combined force, defeated them in a huge battle. Casualties were outrageous. A shocking victory for Pyrrhus. But the problem was, he lost half his army. He wasn't going to get any more reinforcements, while the Romans are going to get more citizen soldiers. And this is where we would get the term a Pyrrhic victory, where you might have won the battle, but you don't have enough to win the war. A Pyrrhic victory. Because eventually, Pyrrhus would run out of soldiers and have to go back to Greece, and the Romans would end up conquering the whole island. And so if you ever heard the term a Pyrrhic victory, it comes from this. And the Romans would learn a lot facing this phalanx. That they needed a much more flexible army. They couldn't match the same tactics. And they would come up with something much better. And so with that, we talked about the Punic Wars. That's what I showed I just want to show the Battle of Cana on Friday. But there are 3 Punic Wars that various degrees will go on for over 100 years. Punic Wars. And a couple things really quick about the Punic Wars. Carthage was becoming an incredibly powerful state. In fact, why I put a question mark there, Carthage was becoming a problem for expanding Rome. This was a Phoenician city, thus the term Punic. It's Latin for Phoenician, so Punic War. And they had dominated much of the coast. They had isolated areas in Spain, but they would get more a little bit later on. Corsica and Sardinia, over half of Sicily, so they dominated much of this trade. Now, they could have possibly coexisted. But to the Roman point of view, this was untenable. They could not tolerate a potential enemy right here. Now, the Phoenicians were basically the Carthaginians. I can't even say it. Carthaginians. There we go. Here, this is basically just a city. And then they conquered areas that they absorbed in. Well, the Romans had the great advantages. They were a republic of people, at least citizens, intensely loyal to Rome. Where Carthage never had that. And the fight, I already mentioned the trade in the Western Mediterranean. And this is a great picture of the harbor. And this harbor went into this giant atrium here. I guess it was just remarkable. It's virtually none of it left, but there's still some remnants of this, with this great harbor at Carthage. So of course Carthage is going to be it's going to be a naval power. And that is how come they could have these islands. The naval power. And thus we mentioned major rival of Rome. Now I'm going to come back to the military. Well, I'll say it real quick. Let me just say it real fast. Carthage had a navy, so Rome had to construct a navy. But Carthage, their army were mostly mercenaries. Soldiers for hire. And their government was an oligarchy. Leadership by full, we've talked about that before. The problem with mercenaries, their loyalty is always pretty shaky. They're only fighting for money. Rome had that huge advantage. They had farmers, these small farmers who were willing to fight and die for the republic. They might not get all the spoils, and boy would they be disappointed when they didn't. So here are it's just a painting of different soldiers from Carthage. And it's vastly different from pikemen to swordsmen, completely different, but they had war elephants. And the elephants with people fighting from the top, fighting from these kind of armored chariots on top, would be devastating. Elephants would be terrified. They'd armor the sides of the elephants, and they could just go through undisciplined forces. Times I've had elephants charge me, I've been a little bit nervous. What do you do if an elephant charges you? Stop! They do. Now, I think you might see a problem when you go further north. Elephants aren't particularly adaptable to cold. And when Hannibal would bring elephants over the Alps, when Carthage went over the Alps, they lost about 3/4 of them. And the ones who survived were pretty beat up. And yes, these are elephants that are captured when they're young. And yeah, you can't domesticate elephants. Even though they would do capture, and they would train some to do tasks for people. Okay, so the Carthage Navy, though, was incredibly powerful. They used these trimedes or the diremedes, or with the slaves or mercenaries rowing them. Here's the big ram. And the Romans had to adapt a fleet to match them. And these are going to be soldiers on top to board ships after they ram them. And this would be under the water, so they would go as fast as they go, and I'll show you a clip of that when we get to the Battle of Atrium, and ram underneath and sink the ship. I just like the horse on there. And I like these. They kind of guess what the designs would be. So that looks kind of cool, like the eyeballs, like looking things. And so with that, so here's Carthage, here's Rome, in the center was Sicily. And that's where the first Punic Wars would start. It would be for Sicily. 23 years they would fight for Sicily. And the Romans could get across to Sicily, but the problem is, because of the Carthage fleet, they could keep resupplying their forces. It's a place called Messina right here. That's where the main fighting was. And this was an exhausting fight. Neither side had a clear advantage. Rome could win on the ground, but Carthage could always resupply. And eventually, to deal with this stalemate, Rome decided, we're going to build a navy. And they copied Greek and Phoenician ships, and they built a fleet. Now, it's going to take them a while. You can't just all of a sudden have ships out there and know how to control them, how to fight, how to organize them. But what they thought at first was, okay, they're better at naval warfare, but we're better at land warfare. Let's bring land warfare to the sea. How do you do that? They came up with a great idea. Okay, it's going to be really hard for them to use their rams to try to knock out the Phoenician ships. Because Carthage have much better sailors, they're much more experienced, they'll be outmaneuvering. But if we could somehow gain hold, you ever heard of like a grappling hook? Where you get a hook and try to, but that's hard to do. So they came up with a device called the raven, or the corvus, which means raven, or like a crow. This massive hook, with a big hook right here, that would come, they would have it on top of their ship, and then when they got close, they would drop it down and release it, and it would fall using gravity, and this hook would stick itself into the enemy ship so they couldn't get away, and then they use that as a bridge to cross over, board the Carthage vessel, and use their superior combat abilities and take the ship. And I got to admit, that's one of the greatest ideas I've ever seen. The Raven. It's a great idea. Do you see the problem with it? They had some effect when Carthage was like, what the heck is that? But then they realized, well, we just stay a little bit away until we ram them. And think about if you have this big, really heavy thing on board your ship. You're already top heavy in these ships. A storm, it takes the whole boat with you. They actually used this for the first Punic Wars, and then they learned enough to become the preeminent naval power. It's just a good story, though. The Raven. And so with that, and here is a picture of a Roman ship as they eventually build a much more powerful ship. I like this reconstruction of a trimene. You can see the ram. And here are Roman soldiers crossing the corvée with their shields. But eventually, after 23 years, Carthage realized Sicily was not worth it, and they surrendered. Rome gained most of Sicily and Corsica and Sardinia. This was a big victory, humiliating defeat for Carthage. But then Carthage took Iberia, which is Spain. I should have put Spain. I don't know why I didn't put Spain. Spain is the Iberian Peninsula. And actually the guy who did it was Hammurabi, the Carthaginian general. After this war, they went into Spain. What's there? It's iron. Think about iron, how important that would be for war. So Carthage was expanding there, and once again you can see Rome thinking, we defeated them once, and now they got even more powerful. Even a more powerful base to threaten us. Rome was leaking into this area here. And they saw themselves as a direct threat this way. And that's going to lead directly to the Second Punic War. Hammurabi is a good name. The Second Punic War. And this map shows where much of the battle would be fought in this area right here. And what happened in the Second Punic War is Hammurabi's son, who was taught from day one to hate the Romans, Hannibal, would invade. It's actually a pretty amazing invasion. They took about 40,000 men, picked up mercenaries along the way, crossed the Alps, and invaded the Italian peninsula. They'd fight 3 huge battles. Like Trasimene, where's the other one at? Trebia, and then of course, Cana. 3 huge battles in the Second Punic War. Hannibal. But 2016, right here was the biggie, Cana. But after Hannibal destroyed a Roman army where they lost 50,000 men, the Roman army of their 80,000, he failed to attack Rome, and Rome survived. For 15 years, Hannibal went up and down that peninsula. But every year he lost men, lost supplies. He could win battles, but he didn't have enough men to take Rome. So Rome always survived. They held out their nucleus. And while he's doing that, well, Hannibal is here wasting away, essentially. Rome's counterattacking. Rome is counterattacking. Where? Spain. Their great military hero right here, Africanus Scipio. He would get that name Africanus because of conquering Carthage. He retraced Hannibal's steps And then using now their powerful Roman navy, they begin to attack them in Spain, driving Carthage out of Spain. Not completely, but driving them out. So while he's attacking here, Hannibal's still here. Now here's a good question for you. Which should they have done? Carthage. Hannibal is here. In fact, had some loyal areas that pledged loyalty to Hannibal in southern Italy. Areas that Rome had conquered and enslaved much of their population. Romans invading here. What do you do? He doesn't have enough men to take Rome. If they pull him out, a lot of the mercenaries, they'll probably lose him because they have no way to pay him. What they decided to do is, under Hannibal's brother, send reinforcements over the Alps and try one last try to get reinforcements and take Rome. I don't think it's a very good idea, but that's what they tried. Rolling the die, we're going to take Rome. So while the Romans are focused here, and it's going to be called the Battle of Meteranus. And the battle is right there. Hasdrubal, Hannibal's brother, was sent to resupply. He needed to link up with Hannibal. But before he could link up, the Romans attacked him. And this battle, the Roman army, outnumbering them, were able to hit Hasdrubal's weak right flank and destroyed his army. If he could have got through to Hannibal, it might have been enough. Hannibal's brilliance might have been enough to take Rome. But instead, this was a decisive Roman victory. And Nero, Claudius Nero, he was a consul. I just put him down there, not one you need to know all that much. But Nero, being one of the co-consuls about that battle, he personally found Hasdrubal's dead body, who had fought in the last little remnants fighting at the retreat here, took out his dagger, cut off his head, and they took it to Hannibal's camp that was near Rome in kind of a half siege, and they used a catapult and shot Hasdrubal's head into Hannibal's camp as a little warning to say, we're going to win this thing. That was fate over Hasdrubal. And so at that, Rome invaded Africa. Africanus Scipio would lead the invasion. Now using their powerful fleet, they attacked south of Carthage. Good plan, actually. Attack south because they know in that area, which is now Tunisia, Carthage doesn't have a lot of allies. They begin to advance north. Hannibal is now recalled, lost most of his army, left him up there where they would wither away, most of them taken prisoner and enslaved. And at the Battle of Zama, right here, the Battle of Zama, 202 BC, the Roman army and now mercenaries, this hodgepodge of forces would fight. Now, Hannibal knew he didn't have the disciplined army to beat him, but he had the war elephants. And his plan was, you see this picture right here, Carthage is in blue. They put the war elephants in front of the main line. He was hoping his cavalry could fight a draw with the Roman cavalry. The war elephants in front, and let the war elephants bash their way through the Roman lines, causing disorder, and then charge through. But the Romans had figured it out after fighting Hannibal. And they came up with a great plan. You can see it here a little bit. Okay, elephants are living animals. They don't want to run into a mass of men, even though they could run them over. And so what the Romans did is they had their men shift and leave corridors between their front lines. You can see it a little bit here. And the elephants just barged their way through and kept going. They just booked the elephants left. And as they went through, they stabbed the elephants, hit their legs, did things. They put little pieces of metal and things, So they're all like this. And then they stepped, and then they threw that stuff out in the middle between them so the elephants stepped on them. I don't know, the poor elephants. But it totally neutralized the elephants. And the elephants disappeared. And while that's going on, the cavalry's fighting here. So now, they got to fight a set-piece battle, and superior Roman infantry started winning here. And just when it looked like the Romans were getting the advantage, Roman cavalry swept in behind and destroyed them. Zama would end the Second Punic War. A huge victory. Good story. You go online and see really cheesy versions of the Battle of Zama with elephants. I'm not going to show them because it was so humorous, but Carthage totally humiliated. They lost almost everything except for the city. Lost almost everything except for the city of Carthage itself. They had to pay an indemnity. Sometimes this will be called reparations, but they had to pay money, a significant amount of gold every year to Rome. And so Carthage, to the Roman point of view, they're done. They're just now at the tip of Africa. We now have Iberia, much of North Africa. The Roman Empire is growing fast. Now, while that's going, Rome would fight. I'll just put this up here. 2 battles with Greece. Because, remember the Macedonians, Alexander? Macedonia allied themselves with Phoenicia. And there would be a couple battles in Rome. It was basically a draw. But while that's going on, Carthage was rebuilt. And they soon became a trading empire. And once again, clever Roman politicians looking for a way to gain power said, Carthage is coming back for you. Hannibal, another Hannibal is growing up right now. Oh, by the way, you know what happened to Hannibal? Hannibal would flee to Anatolia, which is now Turkey, and he tried to ally himself with various groups that are like the Pergamons. And when the Romans found out, the Romans made it very clear, we're not going to allow this, and we see Hannibal as a threat. And so they made him a deal he couldn't refuse. Actually, they made the people he was staying with a deal they couldn't refuse. Convince Hannibal to kill himself or we're invading. Hannibal killed himself. But Carthage then. And that is Cato the Elder. And Cato ended every speech with Carthago delenda est. Okay, it's Latin, I don't know. But Carthage must be destroyed. All through that 2nd century B.C., after the Second Punic War, after they'd been defeated, Cato would end every speech. Every speech. Carthage must be destroyed. Carthage must be destroyed. Rome is humiliated because Carthage survives. Now you might be thinking, why Rome won? You saw the same thing in the United States. Part of the justification for the United States to attack Iraq in 2003 is that Iraq survived. Saddam Hussein, their dictator, survived after the first Gulf War in 1990. And that would be one of the justifications. They're laughing at us because he survived. And by the way, the Iraqi dictator did kind of make a big deal. I took on the most powerful country in the world and I survived. It's not a good reason to go to war, but that would lead directly to the Third Punic War. And this one, Rome is going to make all these series of demands. You must give 300 children of leading nobles, they'll be held hostage. And Carthage, the city itself, must destroy itself and its harbor and move 100 miles inland. Which is kind of shocking when you think about it, isn't it? And so, when Carthage could not accept this, there's no way they could accept this. But when there's no way to accept it, they went to war. I didn't put it down, but they went to war. Carthage will have basically no army anymore. They don't have a base to get mercenaries. They don't have, they have money, but not enough. And so what's going to happen is Carthage will be besieged. And we're going to find out something about the Romans. They have infinite patience. They waited 2 years besieging the great city of Carthage, and eventually Carthage surrendered. They destroyed the city. Okay, that's supposed to be salted, But I accidentally typed in slated. They salted the soil. What happens if you salt the soil? You can't grow anything. So this was destroyed. By the way, then Rome would rebuild Carthage 100 years later on that spot. This salt only lasts for so long. And next time you want to salt the city, don't forget. It can wash away. But what happened to all the men, women, and children? All the men of military age were killed. Every single one. All the men were killed, and everybody else put into slavery. And the thing is, this is going to begin a whole series of conquests for Rome, where they're going to conquer, get wealth, and slaves. And this is going to begin to destabilize the Republic. I should add, do you remember that guy named Archimedes? He was the guy, said Eureka, discovered, he was in Messina when the Romans captured it. He was there, working for Carthage. And he was actually doing some math problems in some dirt when the Romans attacked. And a Roman soldier came up and ordered him away. And he said, just a second, I'm working on this problem, because he was so focused. And what did the Roman do? Killed him right there. And that's how the great mathematician Archimedes died. The Romans. They're an amazing crew, aren't they? So right before this, I know the dates don't really work out. I should have put this, but I want to finish the Punic Wars. Remember the war I told you with Greece? Well, they finished off the Macedonians, what's called the Macedonian War. This is actually the third of the Macedonian War. 168 BC at the Battle of Pydna, the new Roman army. Now, with all this practice fighting Hannibal, they routed the Macedonian phalanx. And this would allow them to conquer much of the Mediterranean. You combine this with the Third Punic War. And how they did it, you can kind of see in this battle here. This is called the Pylus. And I'll show you this a little bit more later, but it's a spear. Okay, so here's the Macedonian phalanx. Remember this? And they would march right at them. And you can see the phalanx right here. This heavy-weighted spear, javelin, the Romans became masters at using this. And it took a heck of a lot of guts. But they would get to within, so here comes this phalanx. And they knew this phalanx, if they're caught out, they're going to be impaled. Nobody wants to get impaled by a pike. Well, at least as far as I know. But they would take this javelin and toss it up in the air. And these javelin would rain down on the men in the phalanx. Even if they put their shield up, the weighted end, see that weight right there, would stick into the shield. And now you can't use the shield anymore. And it had really light, kind of flexible wood that would bend, and so the shield would be unusable, so I'd throw away the shield. And if they're hit, it would go through, it's weighted, it would go through some of their helmet and that sort of thing. And this caused such disruption amongst the phalanx that when they began to break apart little holes, gaps in that line, then the Romans would come in with their swords and just butcher them. And these guys were taught to march, but not necessarily fight close hand to hand. And that's how the Romans did it. That Pylus was a revolution in fighting. Now, of course, you can adapt and beat it, and they would change. But what's going to come out of this is you're going to have these provincial governments. Rome is going to be spread throughout. This is the Roman Empire by 100 BC. The Roman Empire, 100 years earlier, was just basically here. Not Roman Empire, sorry. Still the Roman Republic, but it's becoming an empire. And who ran, remember consuls? They would be the leader in the Roman Republic. Proconsuls would be appointed to run the provinces, the areas they conquered. These were all patricians, and they were inherently corrupt. Not only that, they would send out publicans. Publicans were, and by the way, yes, it comes from republic. They represent the republic, publicans. And these would be the tax collectors for the entire period of the Roman Empire, and then into the Eastern Roman Empire until 1453. And they would squeeze money from the provinces and pocket a lot of it themselves. That was a good way to get rich. And they would go through and suck the wealth out of the colonies. So this area in red was areas they dominated. And in these yellow, these were client states. These were areas that either they conquered or convinced them you're going to be conquered, and they would sign a treaty to become dominated by Rome, even though they're technically independent. Like Ptolemaic Egypt they basically signed a treaty to give up much of their independence, but they were still technically independent until Cleopatra and Antony. We'll get to that on Thursday. And so, one of the things that's going to come out of this is the old Roman values begin to decline. The army, which was this bastion of citizen soldiers fighting for the Republic, became professional and brutal warriors. And once you have a professional army, one of the problems with that is it becomes easier to use it, because you say, hey, they're professionals. But also, professional soldiers are in it for money. They might be loyal to the country, but when they need to expand, they started getting people from the provinces, and it would change the nature. One of the big things they had over Phoenicia were Roman citizens fighting for the nation. More and more, it's going to be Roman soldiers fighting for whatever general can get them money. And you'll see this destabilize. Next, public service was this noble undertaking in early Roman Republic. Soon it became a way to make money. It became very corrupt. You get into government and boy, you can get contracts, get money, you can get rich. Next, by the way, this is the Forum, and this is a picture of the old Roman Forum, and then this is the King's Palace for King Victoria of modern Italy. I just thought it was a good picture. Next, you see more and more Romans just wanting luxury. Instead of this, using a term from Greek, the Spartan existence, fighting for Rome, self-sacrifice for the betterment of the Republic, it became a desire for luxury and riches. And here's the thing, once you get luxury and riches and a life of leisure, you don't want to give it up. And so you're going to get a whole class of people, a tiny minority of the population, that are going to do whatever they can to keep their lifestyle. And an influx of million slaves. All these slaves from areas they captured. And they also took the slave manual from Carthage, and they used that on how to run slaves. Work them hard, give them nothing, and then when they die, claim they had a good life. You were helping. That was from Carthage. This should sound familiar. It's a little like a certain slavery that happened in North America, or the Americas. And then act like, oh, it's civilizing them to death. So with that, and so here is the interior, the restored version of a beautiful Roman house of this wealthy, tiny group on top, this elite, with the gardens inside, the mosaic floors, the columns. I mean, the wealth that some individuals had. And what did it mean? A couple things about it. First off, you had more wealth and more power. Now, you have to write down that. What I want you to write down is this, though. Not the multicultural, but slaves. The slaves start to destabilize the whole thing. Yes, they got wealth and power we mentioned before. But slaves. Slaves begin to displace free farmers. Free farmers, you can't compete with slave labor. They couldn't compete. And this would have lead directly to the end of the Republic. Because free farmers are going to be furious by this shift. This is one of the things I put up. I don't know how much you want it, because I had to, so just put down that. We already kind of talked about the taxes and everything else. But the Republic, and more they'll start saying empire, which comes from the term imperator, we'll get to in a sec. So, what we have is this vast inequality. The wealthy started accumulating more and more wealth, and the poor of Rome, we're talking Roman citizens, gained less and less. Partially because government contracts. Bribes, I mean, they made so much money building up Rome. They rigged the system so they got richer and richer. And there's something else. It's a lot easier to make money if you already have money. It's a term, if you have money, it's easier to make more. If you don't have money, it's hard to start making a lot of money. It's a term we'll talk about more a little bit later on. And Carly might remember this from AP US history called economies of scale. The bigger you are, you have a competitive advantage. The more money you have, you can outcompete those who don't. And that's what we saw happen in the farm. These massive plantations started called latifundio. I'm mispronouncing it, but I'm doing the best I can. Latifundio were these big, huge estates owned by this very elite. This is a mosaic, supposedly, of a latifundio. It's a little pixelated. These massive estates, but these were big slave labor camps. They would have hundreds of slaves who would work these farms and produce goods. Slaves, and they're always bringing in more slaves for more conquest. And the smaller farms can't compete. They can't compete. They can't make enough money. All it takes is one bad year and they're in trouble. Especially when the Romans are fighting all the time and the husbands go off to fight and then they come back to more and more debt. And they have if they can't compete, they got to go into debt. High interest loans, and who provided the high interest loans? The biggest stakeholders. And what happened? If you can't pay back their debt, they might. Remember I showed the 12 tables the other day? If you're going to debt, you lose everything. You might even go into chains and be enslaved, even though that would start to go away. But they lost their farms, and they would migrate to the cities. And these huge human waves of poor, indebted people went to the cities. These are citizens of Rome. Rome would be filled to the brim. Massive numbers of people. They don't have much, but they're members of that tribal assembly. And the tribal assembly picks the consuls, they pick the censors, but most importantly, they pick I thought I put that. The tribunes. The tribunes to the plebes. The tribunes. And that's where I'll put. So tomorrow, very quickly, the Civil War, and then Spartacus. And by the way, how are the slaves going to be treated on this? There will be 4 slave rebellions. 4. From the end of the Third Punic War to the rise of Caesar in 40 BC. 100 years. 4. The biggest will be Spartacus. The Spartacus rebellion. We're going to watch something on Spartacus tomorrow. And there's nothing more horrible and bloody than a slave rebellion. And on that happy note, did you guys know it snowed, by the way? It snowed this weekend. It was really shocking to get up in the morning having over 2 feet of snow outside on Saturday morning. Did anyone have to shovel? You shovel? It was a little shocking. Our basement windows, they're covered. So
Yeah. I did not so much snow.
But what else surprised me too is yesterday then. Because the snow was really fluffy. It was really fluffy.
Yeah.
I bet it went down 8 inches.
Yeah, because it's just like.
And then it's supposed to be in the 50s by the end of the week.
I know, I saw that. That'll be interesting.
So tomorrow I got a map for you too. You excited? Love maps. Yeah, you want a map. I know you. We're gonna watch that decisive battle of Spartacus. It's really good. Just a little bit so that you like it. Are you really? I should check that one out. Ever seen that classic movie from 1960? It's really, it's got a great art. It's a little cheesy, It's really fun. Billy Rock, we can never watch it class. It's literally far. You gotta pick, you punk! Don't touch the blue snowball.
I was voting. That's my excuse.
Yeah, you voted.
I was looking through because there were a bunch of people that I had no idea what it even was that I was voting on, so I had to research a bunch of people, and I checked my phone when I'm done. And I have a text from Marion that's saying, you should probably log on. And I was just like, oh no.